Good morning, Dan and Amy. You ready for this?
I know. I can't wait. You've been teasing it and telling me about it, but I want to hear it.
Seth Meyers.
He's in charge of which show? The Late?
And, they're all the same. Seth Meyers invited three of his female staff writers onto the show as guests, where they performed a little planned response to the Harvey Weinstein scandal.
This just sounds uncomfortable. Is it?
Yeah. This is not going to help battle the cliche that women aren't funny. I'll tell you that.
Thank you for having us. Seth, how did you feel when you heard the allegations?
I was disgusted and shocked. How did you feel?
Well, I was disgusted and not shocked.
I was disgusted and shocked that it took this long to become a story.
I was disgusted and shocked that people were shocked. Seth, we want to start by applauding the women who went on the record to detail Harvey Weinstein's terrible behavior.
So far, we know Weinstein reached cash settlements with 8 women. And where there are 8, there are always more.
And whatever details you hear, just know that means there are worse details we haven't heard.
And the ones we have heard are terrible. One woman said Harvey Weinstein cornered her in a nightclub, and then, when she wouldn't kiss him, masturbated into a potted plant.
And then the plant got a 3-picture deal.
Also in his apology, he blamed disrespect of women on growing up in the 60s and 70s, which would be a good excuse if he came to the present via time machine.
Yeah. Did he not notice things have been changing over the past 50 years?
Does he lose his every time he sees a microwave? That man just made popcorn without a flame.
To make matters worse, he said he was going to go after the NRA and Trump as if our shared politics makes his sexual assault okay.
Hey, I saw a guy masturbate into a plant.
Oh, no.
But it was okay because he was wearing a Planned Parenthood button.
Oh, he's a feminist. Cool.
When he got busted, Weinstein said, to make up for it, I'm starting a scholarship for women directors. That's just him being around more women. That's not the solution, that's the problem. That's like Jared from Subway saying, I know I messed up, but don't worry, I'm starting a T-ball league.
Wow.
I assume those were laugh tracks and not actual humans in the audience, because that's what would be required to make that entertaining.
Were they trying to be funny about sexual assault and groping and bad behavior? Because that's a subject you don't joke around about. The response, and frankly, the late night talk shows now with Kimmel's constant wailing and skits like this. I mean, they're just kind of as ghastly as the D.C. press corps generally, a press corps that, thanks to the Lee Smith piece in the Weekly Standard and some other pieces, we know they knew. How do we know they knew? Because, as Lee Smith points out, we know they knew because he victimized journalists. The vaunted Fourth Estate. For more on the topic of said, we're pleased to be joined by Matthew Continetti, who is editor of the Washington Free Beacon and a contributing editor to the Weekly Standard. He has a recent piece in the Beacon about, pop goes the liberal media bubble. Matthew, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So, pop goes the liberal media bubble. Your piece is not necessarily specific to Harvey Weinstein. It's more of a general statement. What's happening to the D.C. press corps and its appendages in 2017?
Well, I think it's somewhat related to the Harvey Weinstein scandal, which is, we're beginning to see who the media is really interested in communicating with. And it's themselves. It's not actually most Americans in most of the country. It's themselves. And I think one of the reasons that the Weinstein story was obscured or not confirmed or not told until now was precisely this. There were many people who were self-interested in trying to maintain their status in relation to this very powerful Hollywood producer. So we see it in the political world these days even more so, where, when I read the paper, the New York Times, the Washington Post, right, I look at CNN, NBC News, MSNBC, the conversations that are going on are really self-referential. They're more about the feelings of the people doing the writing or the speaking than they are about what's actually going on in the country. And so I think this is just a time for us to recognize, if we're not inside this liberal media bubble, that it's just really not relevant any longer.
Well, you did write in your piece, there still is excellent journalism. I mean, there still are some investigative reporters out there that uncover some politicians who behave badly.
Oh, or Hollywood producers like Weinstein, right? So that's another example of a piece of good investigative work that takes time, and that's exactly what journalism should be doing. The problem is that the resources aren't there, the experience isn't there. You know, most journalists today are basically right out of college or journalism school, and they don't really have many mentors because of these buyout programs that have been going on in the big papers and the big news organizations. So they're kind of just chasing whatever is the, sensationalist story of the moment. That might be good for clicks, but it's not very good for journalism. And what it results in is just people expressing themselves about their likes or dislikes. And hate to break it to you, but they don't like Donald Trump. I know that.
Yes, is that right? Huh.
I mean,
it's just
it's been hard to see on which side of the divide they fall. I haven't been able to discern that. Well, so
I'm here to tell you.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I mean, I think you're getting right to the heart of it. There is no there is journalism that still exists, but so much of journalism, and they've been open and notorious about it right from the day, or within a few days of Trump's victory last November, that we're suspending our normal journalistic standards. We're not about journalism anymore. We're about pushing narratives. And we know this is what happens in the Chicago press corps as well. They don't do journalism, generally speaking. They push narratives.
Yes, absolutely. Or they just speculate. You see it all the time. I've stopped reading. Whenever I see the words may or could in a headline, or I see a headline that ends in a question mark, it's worthless. It's speculation. I mean, if we're reading or watching the news to hear what is happening in the world, headlines with those features in it aren't telling us what's happening. They're telling us what the writer or commentator thinks may happen. But is that what is that worth? I mean, any guess is worth the same as any other. I'd like to know what is actually happening in the world. And the funny thing is, when you look at what is actually happening in the world, things aren't bad at all. I mean, the economy, which is what most people say is their top issue, is doing rather well. I mean, social indices in America haven't plummeted since Donald Trump's election or inauguration. In fact, on the issue that he made kind of the centerpiece of his election campaign, the illegal immigration, we've had a reduction in illegal immigration since he came to office. So you never see those things. What you see instead are, in the case that you mentioned, the narratives, right? Trump and Russia, Facebook and Russia, Russia and Russia. Or you see the just endless kind of emotional, who's mad at Trump now, or the reporter is angry at Trump now, or what did Trump say? Can you believe what Trump did? That's not actually that doesn't have any bearing on the everyday experience of most Americans in this country.
Well, do you believe current, present-day reporters are giving Trump a fair shake at what he's doing, or are they blowing just everything out of proportion? Or are they just not used to a president who tweets?
Well, I think that's all partly true. I think there are a few reporters who've been around that kind of get Trump, and they're willing to cover him as objectively as they can. I think Maggie Haberman at the New York Times does a pretty good job of this. Other reporters are just they're bewildered. They've never encountered a figure like Donald Trump. Of course, many people haven't, right? I mean, it's unprecedented that he's our president. But they just coming from liberal arts colleges and journalism programs, the idea that this rich man would have these opinions and be so direct about them, and the opinions he holds are rather conservative, and not only conservative but populist conservative. They end up being shocked and horrified, and that is injected into their, quote unquote reporting, and it just makes for dismal journalism.
Well, and so that's really interesting. kind of where they're coming from and where this is going. Do you think, with respect to Trump, though, what they're really doing inadvertently, sort of what they did during the campaign, is booing him? Because, Victor Davis Hanson had this formulation that I repeat often because I think it's so spot on, and it's difficult to sum up everything that happened in 2016 in one sentence, but I think this is the closest anyone has come to it. Trump's entire campaign was, those elites in the media and Hollywood and academia and big business and the arts, I know them all, and they're even worse than you think. And this Weinstein story gives credence to that market position, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, in many cases, the elites are incompetent, or in some cases, they're just corrupt. I mean, that's clearly the case with Weinstein. The funny thing is, Trump is very good in kind of tricking people into responding to him and into showing their worst selves and their responses to him. And you see this throughout the campaign. Trump will go after somebody. He's just doing what he does, right, which is bidding himself up in a deal, and by getting the other person, by lowering the stock of the other person, by attacking the other person. What happens is, again and again, the person under attack feels this, desire, this instinct to respond in a Trumpian way. Well,
right.
It doesn't work. Only Trump can do that. Right. And, you saw that with Marco Rubio in the Republican primary. You saw it with Hillary Clinton. I mean, she had no idea how to respond and tried everything. It still didn't work. You see it with, like, Democratic politicians who think that they're going to have, a witty comeback to a Trump tweet. It doesn't matter. They're not Trump. And you see it also with the media. There's no question Trump attacks the media in very vitriolic terms. But their response isn't to prove him wrong, just to go about and doing objective, factual reporting that is detached, from their own feelings or politics. It is to basically amp up the hostile coverage,
right,
and try to outdo Trump in their attacks, and that doesn't work either. It just has the effect of, I think, of marginalizing them.
He is Matthew Continetti. He's the editor of the Washington Free Beacon, contributor to the Weekly Standard. His latest piece you want to check out, Pop Goes the Liberal Media Bubble, at the Free Beacon. Matthew, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
And he joined us on our Turnkey.Pro answer line.